Hi Ernie, this is Spencer Farr. This is the impromptu, at least overview of how we prepare and run nanowires. Just to remind you, with the handy blackboard here, how it works on our chips, and I'll show you a chip in a moment. We have source and drain electrodes, a source and drain, and these are not connected until we place a nanowire across there. Now it's a complete circuit. Now this is a transistor. Then we attach on this nanowire, we attach antibodies. I'm only showing 2 antibodies, but you get the idea. When the cognate antigen binds, since these are charged molecules, and given that this is working at the quantum mechanical level, this is only 50 nanometers in diameter at most, then that is enough to impart, to essentially not only close this circuit, but in fact, as the number of antigens bind to this antibody, the amount of current running through that circuit increases proportionately. I think you've seen that before, but I want to show you the pieces of it now. So this was just a little backdrop. Let me show you how this all fits together. So excuse me for just a sec while I grab the camera and move it over to where we need to see the next piece. So, sorry, the lab is a little bit of a mess here. What do we have here? Okay. These are some of the chips that we start with. These are, it's kind of hard because of the reflection. Oh, there's a good shot. Those are silicon chips, and we have used photolithography to create all of the components on the chip. And then we place the nanowires onto certain elements of the chip, and see if how closely we can zoom in. We may not be able to zoom any closer. Oh, there we go. And then whoops. And if I can do it, I'm trying to show you individual circuits on the chip, the individual pads on the chip. Very hard to see with this reflection. Well, here is an individual chip. Let's try that. And if we're lucky, we can see the individual there. Okay, that gives you an idea. Each one of these pads here we wire bond to, and each one goes down into the center of the chip. That little dark spot in the center, that light spot in the center, is where all 180 nanowires reside. That's less than a millimeter long, maybe 500 microns long. And that is the working part of the nanowire system. That chip then is placed, so let me back up here. So there's an individual chip. We then place it onto, we call this the NanoCard. It should say Vista NanoCards. We place it onto this NanoCard. Here's a very old one, kind of beat up. Then we wire bond appropriate circuits to the card, and you can see this is the pin. These are the pins that then plug into the NanoBioSensor. Next thing we do is we create a PDMS plug that has the channel. Oh, where are we? Here we are. And this has the channel that runs the fluid. Get it from a different angle. It runs the fluid, the sample fluid, right over the top and the center of the chip. Here is then a chip that has the PDMS channel sitting on top of the chip, and then there's just a cover to protect. You can see in that one some of the wire bonding, and then this thick plastic cover also protects the chip and holds the PDMS channel in place. And then you can see there are inlet and outlet tubes This chip has been around, or this NanoCard, this is what we call this complete thing, this NanoCard, has been around for a while. And you can see we have several, and I could pull out a dozen, but they all have the same features. Maybe we can see the wire bonding in this one a little bit better. Right down in the center, there you go. Very tiny wires that connect the termini on the chip to their counterpart termini on the card. Okay, that is the summary of how the chips, the PDMS channel, and then the card all come together. This is, although this is an older version, this is the final product. This would go in a package. The chip is pre-functionalized with whatever sets of antibodies are on there. These things are quite stable. They have been abused terribly. We'll see one that's several months old today, and I'll show you it working. And this is what we would sell. Of course, we need to put a little nicer top on it, maybe a clamshell on it. But this is ready to sell now. We're going to walk over here to the NanoBioSensor system, and I'm not going to promise that it's going to work the first time. In fact, I've been talking so much that I have got things turned off. But this is the NanoBioSensor system. Here is a NanoCard that is plugged into a pin slot in the NanoBioSensor system itself. There's just inlet and outlet tubes. And then over here are the samples. For today, we just have wash buffers and sample buffers, and one can put various inlet tubes into the sample buffer if one wants to collect samples that way. My phone, I'll get it in a second. Alternatively, this is the injection port. If one has a small sample, one injects a Hamilton syringe in that port and turns the knob here from load to inject, and the sample then flows down through the card and across the nanowires. So that's how one does a small sample, such as a 100 microliter sample from a finger stick. I had this computer running. Oh yes, okay, so here is the Vista nanowire, Vista software. I'm just trying to save the data now. Let me get rid of this Excel file, and then we'll start this thing up. So hopefully you can see some of this. Now we simply hit start, and we tell the instrument which nanowires we want to measure. And it will simply start pulling buffer over the nanowires. It takes a little bit of time for the buffer to reach the nanowires, and you'll start seeing signal showing up here. This part of the screen, if you can, just gives us a color code which nanowire is which, and then over here we actually get the reading second by second of what the voltage or the nanosiemens is for that nanowire. I can see this is not showing up terribly well. Now, this is an old card, and we're looking to see just how sensitive it is. So I'm going to change the scale just a bit. We'll go to -1. And yes, we have definitely some functioning nanowires here. Here's one, here's one. And if we look at these values, we can determine which of other nanowires are functioning. So it looks like channel 8 and channel 7, etc. So we're beginning to collect the data here. Let's see if I get it so you can actually see the screen. I'll send you the real data. But this is how it works. And then, so buffer is now running. Let me see if there's any way I can adjust the lighting so you can see the screen. Or I'll play with this just a little bit. I don't know, taking a picture of a computer screen is hard to do. There's a little bit. So you can see that we're beginning to collect data from, so there we go, some of the nanowires. And we haven't wired up all of them by any means. So we're collecting data from just a couple of nanowires in this particular case. And then what we would do is we would, let's see if this chip has a sweep. We have a sweep function up here. And this, if this chip has a sweep function, there it goes. Oh, very nice. It went to 100 millivolts right away. It's now going to climb back down to its original position. Oh, very nice. Excuse me, it'll go to minus 100 millivolts. And then what that allows us to do is ask, how does each individual nanowire respond to a known electric field? So you can see that the channel encoded in red here had a very nice response. There's one up here, a little more sensitive, so let me change the scale up here, and we can either do this in linear or log scale. So, oh, that was too much. Sorry. We'll go to 0 here and see. Yes, okay, so now we can see, so we've got everybody on the same scale. We have, looks like 3 good devices. Hopefully you can see that. We changed the scale by a log, but we can see 3 good devices on this chip, each that responded with 100 plus 100 to minus 100 millivolt sweep. And this is how we normalize. So the next thing we would do would be to inject a sample. And it takes me a little bit of time to get the sample ready, plus I probably have to set this camera down to inject the sample, but I will inject the sample and then we'll see if this card still functions. Keep in mind, all we have to do to inject the sample is put it into this little port on top. This, by the way, is the entire sensor. We wanted it to look a little unconventional. One of the things I wanted to show you is this is very sensitive to change in electric field. So we're going to put what's called a Faraday cage, just a metal cage around this lid. And when people are actually running experiments, they would shut the lid and it would protect the nanowires from just stray electric field caused by every time an incubator goes on, for example, or the tissue hood comes on, or the lights or air conditioning come on, or a magnetic plate, or, excuse me, almost anything. Then we get a little bit of noise. This is actually a pretty good card, though. It's been around for a long time. Again, this is now at a very low amplification, but you can see we have 3 good devices here. I will come back in just a moment and I will inject, this is a PSA labeled sample or card, I believe, and we'll inject some PSA. One thing I want to do is I will change the scale on this one more time just so you can now see and watch good devices. So there, this red device is a very good device. The green device is a very good device. And then there's another one. It must be above the signal cutoff that we've determined. The output is in volts. Obviously right now we're looking at millivolts, but we can, the end user can convert that to nanosiemens, and then the function in the software allows one to convert the actual signal to concentration once one has run a standard curve. One can switch from the sample to buffers, to washes simply by clicking on the appropriate button. We can adjust the pump speed. Right here, this is a very low pump speed, which is good when you're actually running a sample. So this card, by the way, was made many months ago, and it has some very nice devices on it. So I'll shut up for now, and I'll come back after I inject some samples, and we'll see what happens. Back to you in a sec.